All right, good morning. Welcome to America's Most Boring Podcast. We will be talking about insurance, commercial insurance in particular. We're going to be talking about what does commercial auto insurance cover. Jesse's been on our commercial insurance side. He's been in the business for 20 years. So why don't you go through some of the things that you want it to cover and maybe some things that you've seen it not cover, maybe due to errors or people not paying attention.
Sure. So a lot of questions that I get are, why is commercial auto so much more expensive than my personal auto?
Yeah.
And that's because your personal auto probably has a $100,000 limit of liability, and we quote $1 million. So just multiply what you're paying personally times 10, and it's probably not that far off.
So to put that in layman's terms, limits of liability. That means you get in an accident. Let's just say it's your fault. Someone's not happy. They want to be made whole. They sue you. Personally, you have coverage maybe up to 100,000. But commercial, that usually the minimum's $1 million.
Right.
So if you were paying for your personal and you want to go out and start a company, or you had a company for a while and now you need a company car, that right there is going to cause an increase. Okay.
So it is more expensive, but $100,000 does not go very far. I mean, there's SUVs out there just that we see driving in our neighborhood that are $120,000. So that means you're coming out of pocket potentially for $30,000 just from a fender bender with one of those fancy SUVs. So
Okay, that's a great point.
can get expensive.
Are there state minimum requirements for commercial liability, or is that more of an insurance carrier minimum that you see on the commercial?
Yeah, typically we just write it for $1 million. Occasionally we'll see it with a lower limit from a carrier like a State Farm who does a lot of personal auto, and they can have a little more flexibility. But typically the commercial carriers we work with will not go below $1 million in liability.
Okay, and anything that we need to know, difference between commercial and personal for, I get in a wreck and it's my fault. I'm assuming I'd have to pay a deductible.
Yep.
So is collision or comprehensive, and what's the difference in that? Is there anything that we need to be aware of if we're looking for a company as opposed to an individual?
Yeah, so like you said, there's really two parts of a commercial auto policy. You've got the liability. That's the most expensive part. So people think, oh, I've dropped the collision coverage. I should save a bunch of money. But really, the liability is the more expensive part. The physical damage coverage is what we call it. That's going to be collision or other than collision. So collision, obviously, you get in a wreck or whatever, something happens with an auto accident, that's collision. Then other than collision would be theft. Typically. So
Okay.
if someone stole your car and drove off with it.
What if I hit a deer? Is that going to all fall under collision?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because you were driving it.
What about a hailstorm?
Yeah, if it was parked, that would just be other than collision. Yeah, if you
Okay.
came out and you had dents all over and had to repaint
Okay.
glass. So yeah, it's a great question.
Okay, but theft, would that fall in other than collision?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe a little more straightforward on the commercial insurance side.
Yep.
All right. And any advice for how to maintain or potentially lower commercial insurance rates? Maybe we'll end on that.
Yeah, so really the state of Georgia, that's really the biggest pain point for all of our carriers. They're just getting burned with these massive liability claims. Most of them are from auto. You see the plaintiff attorney ads, standing on top of trucks and that sort of thing. So there's really three main parts. There's liability, that's if you cause an accident, but you also have liability for your employees who drive. So that's called a non-owned auto liability. So even though the company may be like, well, I don't have any vehicles, my employees just drive, they could still get brought into a lawsuit. That's called a non-owned auto liability.
Okay.
And then hired auto would be if they went out and rented a vehicle. So, but at the end of the day, the best things that you could do to save money would be taking a look at your drivers that you're hiring, check their motor vehicle report, making sure they're not having 5 DUIs and
Okay.
super speeder tickets. Usually those are an indicator that they might not be as good of a driver as you want for your company. And then once you kind of screen those drivers, you need to train them on, hey, you're not allowed to look at your cell phone while you're driving. So it's called a cell phone use policy. And again, it's just having management buy-in to say, hey, we've got to train our guys so they understand what we expect, right?
Right.
And the last thing I would say, last two things would be getting a GPS telematic system. So a lot of the personal carriers, you've already heard about that on TV. And essentially, they're just monitoring how you drive. If you're speeding, texting and driving, it's just an app on your phone. So some
Okay.
of the commercial carriers are starting to look at that too.
Okay.
but mostly personal stuff. But the last thing would be dash cameras.
Okay.
And just people are doing scams where they'll pull in front of anybody and then slam on their brakes, causing an accident, and then alleging, oh, you hit me. Because typically whenever you follow too closely, you're cited at fault, even if someone slammed on their brakes or something like that. So that dash camera can really get you out of a mess if something happens. So those are the big things that we recommend our commercial clients do to bring those costs down.
Yeah, and so if you're listening to this and you have 10 trucks or more, it can add up.
Yeah.
And so those are things within your control. Probably the last thing I would say, there's probably a difference in price in a 2025 Ford, F-150 as opposed to, say, a year 2000. Yeah. So the type of vehicle, the more expensive the vehicle, the more it would cost to replace it if you got into an accident. So that's going to affect the rate as well. It's interesting. And last thing, I think we're starting to see maybe some carriers in trying to control the cost. They're either sending or they're giving you a discount on some of those dashboards as well. Are we seeing that in the market?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have certain carriers that will require that you put a dash camera on your truck if you don't already have it. So yeah. They'll give you an incentive, a discounted price. So some carriers will do it for no cost. Some it's a discounted one. But at the end of the day, it's tried and true that those will help you reduce claims by doing all those things. So the last thing that I forgot to mention was where the vehicle is located. So if you're a contractor or service business with a lot of vehicles outside of the city, city of Atlanta is where we are. Anything inside the city is a much higher rate. So they'll look at where that vehicle's garage. So we'll see rates 5x more, for Atlanta versus somewhere more rural. So just all things to keep in mind as you're looking at different options to try to find the best solution.
So the price of Atlanta as opposed to Flintstone, Georgia, which is where I'm from, a little different because you got 1,000 less cars, in small town USA as opposed to here. Yeah. It's interesting you did say, and we'll end on this, if you're an employer and you're feeling, maybe the staff is getting pushback because you're going to want to introduce the dash cam, maybe it's a little big brother for them. It also is there to protect them because, as you said, what if they were innocent? They didn't hit someone or they didn't hit as hard because someone's, complaining about the neck. Yeah. If they have that dashboard, that's going to protect that employee just as much as it is an employer. So it's not always about necessarily monitoring, if they're texting and driving. It's really there to protect them in the event that they did the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That could get them from an at-fault citation ticket, which would affect their personal driving record, by getting them off the hook on that. Okay. So it's a big deal. I'm glad you mentioned that. And at the end of the day, it's just a very litigious world we live in. Just letting your employees know that, hey, we're not doing this to Big Brother watching you. We're doing this to keep you out of trouble, to keep you safe. We want you to come home to your family every night. And that's the number one goal of every business is to let their employees do their job and then come home to have dinner with their families.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.